The warning lights flashed red across the main screen of the Prometheus spaceship. Chief Engineer Jai-Ho Park looked up from his desk, his coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. The ship's computer had found something unusual. "Computer, show me what you found," Jai-Ho said. He put down his coffee and moved closer to the screen. A huge structure appeared on the display. It was floating in space near a dying star. The structure looked like a massive metal ring with dozens of thick metal arms reaching toward the star. Jai-Ho had never seen anything like it before. "This is interesting," he said to himself. He pressed the button to call the ship's bridge. "Captain, you need to see this." 5 minutes later, Captain Do-hyun Lee stood next to Jai-Ho, both men staring at the screen. The captain scratched his head. "What do you think it is?" "It looks like some kind of machine," Jai-Ho said. He pointed to the metal arms reaching toward the star. "See these parts? They're positioned perfectly to interact with the star's surface. I think it's an engine. A star engine." The captain's eyes went wide. "A star engine? You mean something that can control a star?" Jai-Ho nodded. He moved his fingers across the computer screen, making the image bigger. "Look at the design. It's amazing, but something's wrong with it. See these dark sections? They should be glowing if the engine was working." The ship's communication system suddenly made a loud beeping noise. A message was coming in from Earth Command. Director Hae-Nul Kim's face appeared on a smaller screen. "Jai-Ho Do-hyun," she said, looking excited. "We've matched your discovery with some old records. That structure you found. Over 1,000 different alien species have tried to fix it. None of them succeeded." Jai-Ho felt his heart beat faster. This was exactly the kind of challenge he loved. "How old is it?" he asked. "The records say it's at least 50,000 years old," Hae-Nul replied. "It was built by a species called the Architects. They disappeared long ago, but they left this engine behind. It was supposed to save their star from dying." The captain looked worried. "If 1,000 species couldn't fix it, what makes you think we can?" Jai-Ho smiled. He pointed to a section of the engine that looked like a giant pipe system. "Because I think I know what this is. It reminds me of the old steam engines from Earth's history. The basic principles might be the same, just much bigger." He turned to Captain Do-hyun. "We should go closer. I need to see it better." The captain thought for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, but be careful. If something stopped 1,000 other species from fixing it, there must be a good reason." As the Prometheus moved closer to the massive structure, Jai-Ho couldn't stop looking at it. The star engine was bigger than anything humans had ever built. Its metal surface was dark and cold, waiting for someone to wake it up again. He noticed something else too, a small light blinking near what looked like an entrance. "Captain," he said, pointing to the light, "I think something's still active in there. Something's still running after all these years." "Should we try to dock with it?" the captain asked. Jai-Ho looked at the dying star behind the engine. Its red light filled the ship's windows. If they could fix this engine, they might save not just this star, but learn how to save other dying stars too. This could change everything. "Yes," Jai-Ho said firmly. "We should dock. Someone has to fix it. Why not us?" As the Prometheus carefully moved toward the docking area, Jai-Ho gathered his tools. He had a feeling he was about to face the biggest engineering challenge of his life. But that's exactly what he had trained for. Sometimes the hardest problems needed a fresh set of eyes, human eyes, to solve them. The airlock door opened with a soft hiss. Jai-Ho Park stepped into the ancient star engine, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Behind him, Junior Engineer Yi-Jin Cho followed carefully, carrying their testing equipment. "It's so quiet," Yi-Jin whispered. Her voice echoed through the metal hallway. Suddenly, blue lights flickered to life along the walls. A gentle voice spoke from hidden speakers. "Welcome, visitors. I detect that you are from Earth." "How interesting." Jai-Ho and Yi-Jin looked at each other in surprise. They hadn't expected anyone, or anything, to be here. I am the curator, the voice continued. I have maintained basic systems here for 50,000 years, waiting for someone who could help. You're an AI? Jaiho asked, looking around for the source of the voice. Yes, the architects created me to watch over their greatest project. Please, follow the lights. I will show you the control room. The blue lights made a path down the hallway. As they walked, Jaiho noticed that everything was built on a massive scale. The corridors were wide enough for 20 people to walk side by side. The ceiling rose high above them. Why did the architects leave? Yi-Jin asked as they walked. They had no choice, the curator replied. Its voice held a note of sadness. The star began dying faster than expected. When the engine failed, they had to evacuate. They'd promised to return, but they never did. The path led them to a huge round room. Screens covered the walls, showing different parts of the engine. In the center stood a large control panel, covered in dust. 1,000 species have tried to fix the engine, the curator said. Some of the galaxy's best engineers have failed. The last attempt was 300 years ago. Jaiho walked to the control panel and wiped away some dust. The controls looked complicated, but he could see patterns in their layout. Can you show us what's wrong with the engine? The screens change, showing a detailed diagram of the star engine. The main problem is here, the curator said. A section of the diagram glowed red. The thermal distribution system failed. Without it, the engine cannot safely handle the star's energy. Yi-Jin moved closer to study the diagram. These channels look like heat pipes, she said. Similar to what we use in smaller engines, just much bigger. Jaiho nodded. The principles are the same. Heat needs to move from here to here. He pointed to different parts of the diagram. But something's blocking the flow. Correct, the curator said. But the blockage is in a section that's extremely hot. No one has found a way to fix it without their equipment melting. Jaiho pulled out his tablet and started taking notes. We might have some ideas about that. On Earth, we've dealt with similar problems in our nuclear reactors. The scale is different, but the challenge is the same. The curator was quiet for a moment. You seem confident. The others were confident too, at first. But they all gave up when they realized how difficult it was. Humans are good at fixing things, Jaiho said with a smile. Sometimes the hardest part is just understanding how something works. Once you understand that, you can solve any problem. He turned to Yi-Jin. We should get the full team in here, and we'll need to run some tests. I hope you are right, the curator said. I have waited so long for someone to succeed. The star has less than 1 Earth year before it begins to collapse. After that, it will be too late to save it. Jaiho looked up at the screens showing the dying star. They had 1 year to solve a problem that had stumped 1,000 alien species. It seemed impossible. But impossible problems were exactly what human engineers were best at solving. Director Hae-Nul Kim stood in her office on Earth, staring at the message on her screen. The Galactic Council's warning was clear. Humans must stay away from the ancient star engine. They can't stop us from trying, she said to herself. She pressed a button to call the Prometheus. Jaiho's face appeared on her screen. He looked tired but excited. Director Kim, we've made some interesting discoveries. Jaiho, wait. Hae-Nul said. The Galactic Council sent us a warning. They say we must leave the star engine alone. Jaiho frowned. Why? We're making progress. The curator has shown us the engine's plans, and we think we understand what's wrong. They say it's too dangerous. The last species that tried to fix it caused an explosion that destroyed 3 of their ships. On another screen, Hae-Nul could see Captain Do-hyun listening. He looked worried, but he didn't say anything. Director, Jaiho said, we've found something interesting. Would you like to know why the other species failed? Hae-Nul nodded. Tell me. They all tried to use advanced technology to fix the problem. But the engine isn't that complicated. It works like the old machines we had on Earth hundreds of years ago. The other species didn't understand these simple principles because their technology was too advanced. He held up an old book. Look what Yi Jin found in the ship's library. It's about steam engines from Earth's Industrial Revolution. The drawings in this book look just like parts of the star engine, just much bigger. Newell smiled. She understood what Jai-ho meant. Sometimes newer wasn't better. Sometimes old, simple solutions worked best. The council says the engine is beyond our level of technology, she said, but maybe that's why we can fix it. We still remember how these simple machines work. The curator's voice joined their conversation. Director Kim, your engineers have shown more understanding of the engine's basic principles in 3 days than other species showed in years. See, Jai-ho said, we can do this. We just need more time. Newell thought for a moment. The Galactic Council was powerful. They could cause problems for Earth if humans disobeyed their warning. But she believed in Jai-ho and his team. Keep working, she said. I'll deal with the council. Just be careful. There's one more thing, Jai-ho said. We found records of the previous repair attempts. The other species failed because they tried to use force. They tried to make the engine work their way instead of understanding how it was meant to work. And you understand how it's meant to work? Jai-ho nodded. I think so. It's like fixing an old car. You need to understand what the original builders were thinking. You need to see the problem through their eyes. How long do you need? A few weeks, maybe. The star is getting more unstable, but we still have time. Newell looked at the council's warning message again. Then she deleted it. You have 1 month. After that, the council will probably send ships to make us leave. 1 month will be enough, Jai-ho said confidently. Humans have been fixing broken machines for thousands of years. This is just a bigger version of problems we've solved before. After the call ended, Newell looked out her window at the night sky. Somewhere up there, her team was about to attempt something that 1,000 alien species had failed to do. But she wasn't worried. Sometimes being less advanced was an advantage. Sometimes understanding the basics was more important than having the newest technology. She sat down to write her response to the Galactic Council. She would be polite, but firm. Humans had a right to try where others had failed, and maybe, just maybe, they would succeed where others could not. Jai-ho and Yi Jin sat in the engine's control room, surrounded by old technical drawings spread across the floor. They had been studying these drawings for hours, comparing them to the engine's design. Look at this, Yi Jin said, pointing to an old drawing of a steam engine from Earth. The way it moves heat from one place to another. It's exactly the same as the star engine. Jai-ho nodded. He picked up another drawing and held it next to the star engine's diagram on the screen. The architects used the same principles, just on a much larger scale. They were brilliant. The curator's voice joined their discussion. The architects believed in elegant solutions. They said the best machines were the ones that used the simplest principles. They were right, Jai-ho said. He stood up and walked to the main control panel. That's why the other species failed. They tried to use complex solutions when they needed simple ones. Yi Jin picked up their testing device. The screen showed temperature readings from different parts of the engine. The heat isn't moving through the system properly. It's like a blocked pipe in a heating system. Exactly, Jai-ho said excitedly. That's what everyone missed. They thought it was a complex problem that needed advanced technology. But it's just a blocked pipe. A very big, very hot blocked pipe. He turned to another screen that showed the engine's inner workings. See these channels? They're like the pipes in an old radiator. Hot liquid is supposed to flow through them, carrying heat away from the star. But something's stopping the flow here. He pointed to a spot where several channels met. The curator seemed interested. Other species tried to fix this with force fields and energy beams. They all failed. Because that's not how the engine was designed to work, Yi Jin said. She pulled up more diagrams on her tablet. It's supposed to work like this, She showed them an animation of how heat should flow through the system. Jaiho studied the animation carefully. The other species tried to bypass the blocked section, but we need to clear it, just like we would clear a blocked pipe on Earth. But the temperature in that section is extremely high, the curator warned. No material can survive direct contact with it. Jaiho smiled. We don't need to touch it directly. Look at this. He picked up an old book about industrial cleaning methods. On Earth, we used to clean huge industrial pipes without ever going inside them. We can do the same thing here. Yi Jin's eyes widened as she understood what Jaiho was suggesting. We could use the engine's own systems against the blockage, like using steam pressure to clear a blocked pipe. Exactly, Jaiho said. He turned to the main screen where the curator could see them better. The architects built backup systems into everything. I bet they included a way to clean these channels. We just need to find it. The curator was quiet for a moment. There is a maintenance system, it finally said, but it was considered too primitive by the other species. They ignored it. Show us, Jaiho and Yi Jin said together. As the curator displayed the maintenance system's controls, both engineers began to smile. It was so simple, so elegant, that most advanced species would never have thought to use it. Sometimes the best solutions were the oldest ones. Sometimes you had to look backward to move forward. They had found their answer in humanity's past. Now they just had to make it work. It was late in the ship's night cycle when Jaiho finally understood what needed to be done. He had been staring at the maintenance system controls for hours, making calculations on his tablet. The solution was so simple that he almost couldn't believe it. Yi Jin, he called out. Come look at this. Yi Jin walked over from her workstation, holding a cup of coffee. She had dark circles under her eyes, but they still lit up with interest as she looked at Jaiho's calculations. The problem isn't just the blocked pipe, Jaiho explained. It's the way the heat moves through the whole system. The other species tried to fix the blockage, but they never fixed the flow pattern. He showed her a diagram he had drawn. It looked like a river with many branches, showing how heat should flow through the engine. The architects designed the engine to work like a river system, he continued. When one channel gets blocked, the heat should flow around it through other channels. But the backup channels are closed. The curator's voice joined their conversation. The backup channels were damaged during the last repair attempt. The species that tried to fix the engine thought they were unnecessary. But they're the key to everything, Jaiho said. He pointed to his diagram again. We don't need to clear the blockage first. We need to restore the backup channels first. Then we can use them to safely clear the main blockage. Yi Jin studied the diagram carefully, like creating a detour around a blocked road. Exactly, Jaiho said. Once we have the detour working, we can fix the main road without causing traffic problems. He turned to the main screen where the curator could see them better. Curator, can you show us the backup channel controls? A new set of controls appeared on the screen. They were covered in dust, unused for thousands of years. But when Jaiho pressed a button, a soft hum filled the room. The backup channels were still working. This is remarkable, the curator said. No other species thought to use these old systems. They all tried to bypass them with their advanced technology. Jaiho smiled. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. We just need to remember how they work. He pulled up more diagrams on the screen. Look at these temperature readings. If we open the backup channels in the right order, we can create a safe path for the heat to flow. Then we can use that flow to clear the main blockage. Like using water pressure to clear a blocked pipe, Yi Jin added. The heat itself will do the work for us. The curator seemed to think about this for a moment. Your solution is elegant. It uses the engine's own systems instead of fighting against them. The architects would have approved. Jaiho began entering commands into the control panel. The backup channels started to open one by one, each one glowing with a soft blue light on the status screen. How long will this take? Yi Jin asked. A few days to get all the backup channels working properly, Jai-ho replied. Then maybe a week to clear the main blockage. We'll need to go slowly to avoid any sudden pressure changes. He looked up at the main screen, which showed the dying star. Its red light filled the control room. We have time. The star will hold together long enough. The curator's voice was soft but hopeful. In 50,000 years, no one has ever tried to fix the engine this way. Perhaps that is why no one has succeeded until now. Jai-ho nodded. Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs came from looking at old problems in simple ways. Sometimes the best way forward was to remember what worked in the past. The repair team stood in their protective suits, looking at the massive maintenance tunnel ahead of them. Even with the backup channels working, this would be dangerous work. Remember, Jai-ho said through the suit's communication system, we need to open the valves in exactly the right order. One mistake could send a surge of heat through the wrong channel. Myra-song, the systems specialist, checked her instruments one last time. Temperature in the backup channels is stable. We're ready to start. Captain Do-hyun watched from the control room through their helmet cameras. Be careful in there. If anything looks wrong, get out immediately. The team walked into the tunnel. Their boots made hollow sounds on the metal floor. The walls glowed with a dull red color from the heat flowing through nearby channels. First valve is ahead, Yi-jin said. She pointed to a large wheel mounted on the wall. This will start redirecting heat through the backup system. Jai-ho and Myra grabbed the wheel together. It was huge, designed for the much larger architects. Even with their combined strength, it barely moved at first. The heat is affecting the metal, Myra said, checking her instruments. The valve is expanding. We need more force. They pulled harder. Slowly, the wheel began to turn. A deep rumbling sound filled the tunnel as heat started flowing through the new path. First valve is open, Jai-ho reported, moving to the second one. They walked deeper into the tunnel. The temperature was rising, despite their protective suits. Sweat ran down their faces inside their helmets. Temperature is climbing faster than expected, Myra warned. The old channels are absorbing more heat than our calculations showed. Suddenly, a loud creaking sound echoed through the tunnel. The walls shuddered. Get back, Jai-ho shouted. They ran as a section of wall panels broke free, crashing to the floor behind them. Is everyone okay? Captain Do-hyun's worried voice came through their communications. We're fine, Jai-ho replied, catching his breath. The heat is putting more stress on the structure than we thought. We need to adjust our approach. The curator's voice joined them. The last species that attempted repairs caused similar structural damage. They retreated at this point. We're not retreating, Jai-ho said firmly. We just need to think about this differently. He studied the fallen wall panels. The metal is expanding too fast. We need to open the valves more slowly, give the structure time to adjust. They tried again with the second valve, turning it just a tiny bit at a time. This time, the walls held steady. It's working, Yi-jin said excitedly. The heat is flowing evenly through the backup channels now. For the next 6 hours, they moved through the tunnel, slowly opening valve after valve. Each one was a battle against heat, time, and the massive scale of the engine. But they kept going. Finally, they reached the last valve. The temperature in the tunnel was almost unbearable now, even with their suits. This is it, Jai-ho said. Once we open this one, we can start clearing the main blockage. Together, they turned the final wheel. The engine rumbled deeply, like a giant waking up from a long sleep. All valves are open, Myra reported. Heat flow is stabilizing through the backup channels. They had done what no other species had managed. They had restored the engine's original backup systems, using nothing but the tools and knowledge the architects had left behind. Now came the hard part, clearing the main blockage itself. 3 ships from the Galactic Council arrived just as Jai-ho and his team prepared for the final test. The alien vessels were sleek and advanced, making the Prometheus look old and simple in comparison. We are here to witness your attempt. the council representative said through the communication system, though we expect it will fail like all others before it. Director Haynewell's face appeared on another screen. Show them what humans can do, she said to Jai-Ho. Her voice was calm, but he could see the worry in her eyes. Jai-Ho stood at the main control panel. Yi Jin and Mai-Ray were at their stations, monitoring the backup channels. Captain Do-hyun watched from his command chair, ready to evacuate if anything went wrong. All backup channels are working perfectly, Mai-Ray reported. Heat flow is stable. Power levels in the maintenance systems are normal, Yi Jin added. We're ready to start. The curator's voice held a mix of hope and fear. In 50,000 years, no one has ever come this close to restoring the engine. Please be careful. Jai-Ho took a deep breath. Beginning main blockage clearance procedure, he announced. His fingers moved across the control panel, entering the commands they had practiced so many times. The engine rumbled as hot plasma from the star began flowing through the backup channels. On the main screen, they could see the heat building up behind the blockage. Pressure is rising, Mai-Ray said, approaching critical point. The council representatives watched silently. Their sensors were probably recording everything, studying how these primitive humans dared to attempt what their advanced civilizations had failed to do. Activating pulse sequence, Jai-Ho said. He pressed another series of buttons. The engine shuddered as pulses of pressure hit the blockage from both sides. Warning lights flashed across the control panel. Structure is holding, Yi Jin reported. The reinforcements we added are working. Suddenly, the engine made a sound like thunder. The whole station shook. Blockage is breaking up, Mai-Ray shouted excitedly. Heat flow is increasing through the main channel. On the screen, they could see the blocked section beginning to clear. 50,000 years of built-up material was finally breaking apart, carried away by the flowing plasma. Impossible, one of the council representatives muttered. They're actually doing it. Jai-Ho kept his eyes on the controls. Starting final phase, he said, redirecting power to the main systems. The engine's vibrations changed tone, becoming deeper, steadier. Lights that had been dark for thousands of years began to glow. Main channel is clear, Mai-Ray announced. All systems are responding. The engine, it's working. The control room erupted in cheers. Even Captain Do-hyun forgot his usual serious manner and smiled broadly. Full power test beginning now, Jai-Ho said. He moved the main control lever slowly forward. The star engine came fully alive for the first time in 50,000 years. They could feel its power through the floor, through the walls, through their bodies. The dying star's dangerous pulses began to steady as the engine started its work. Engine performance at 70% and rising, Yi Jin reported. No warnings, no errors. Everything is working exactly as it should. The council representatives were silent, watching in amazement as the primitive humans succeeded where their advanced civilizations have failed. Sometimes the simplest solutions were the best ones. Sometimes you just needed to understand the basics to see the simple truth behind complex problems. The ancient star engine was working again, and humanity had proven itself to the galaxy. 1 month after the successful repair of the star engine, Jai-Ho stood in the grand meeting hall of the Galactic Council. The ceiling rose so high he could barely see it. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the room, all watching him with great interest. The head counselor, a tall being with silvery skin, spoke in a deep voice. Engineer Jai-Ho Park of Earth, you have accomplished something that we thought impossible. Tell us how you succeeded where 1,000 species failed. Jai-Ho looked at his team standing beside him. Yi Jin, Mai-Ray, and Captain Do-hyun. Director Haynewell sat in the audience, smiling proudly. We succeeded because we remembered our past, Jai-Ho said simply. On Earth, we still teach our children about old machines, about how things work at their most basic level. We didn't try to use advanced technology. We used simple principles that have worked for centuries. The curator's voice joined them through the hall's speakers. The humans understood what the architects knew. that the simplest solution is often the best solution. But your species is so young, another council member said. You barely have space travel. How could you understand an ancient star engine better than we did? Jai-Ho pulled out his old book about steam engines. Because we're young, we remember what it's like to build things from scratch. We remember how to fix things with basic tools. Sometimes being less advanced is an advantage. The head counselor nodded slowly. Perhaps we have forgotten too much in our rush to advance. We replaced simple knowledge with complex technology. The engine is now operating at full power, Jai-Ho reported. The star has stabilized. It will live for thousands more years, and we learned something very important from fixing it. What did you learn? The council member asked. That every problem has a simple core if you look hard enough. The architects built their engine using basic principles of heat and pressure, things that haven't changed in millions of years. We just had to see those principles beneath all the complex systems. Director Haynewell stood up. The human race offers this knowledge to the Galactic Council. We will teach our simple methods to any species that wants to learn. Sometimes moving forward means remembering what worked in the past. The hall filled with murmurs of agreement. Many of the alien representatives were already taking notes, studying the simple diagrams Jai-Ho had brought with him. The head counselor raised his hand for silence. Humanity has proven itself to be a valuable member of the galactic community, not because of advanced technology, but because you remembered what the rest of us forgot. The importance of understanding the basics. Jai-Ho looked at his team again. They had done more than fix an ancient machine. They had shown the galaxy a different way of thinking, a human way of thinking. Sometimes the simplest solutions require the most wisdom to see. There are many more ancient machines waiting to be fixed, the head counselor continued. Would humanity be willing to help restore them? Yes, Jai-Ho said without hesitation. That's what engineers do. We fix things, and we're happy to teach others how to fix things too. As he looked out at the gathered representatives of 1,000 worlds, Jai-Ho smiled. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy, not by being the most advanced, but by remembering its roots, by understanding that progress didn't always mean making things more complex. Sometimes, the greatest wisdom was in seeing the simple truth at the heart of things.